So the book I read was Pride and Prejudice, and during the last section, a lot of things happened. Obviously, the two eldest, the main character got engaged and was married off. The eldest, her sister was married. Her other sister was married. Her two younger sisters were then got more attention from the parents. The parents were happy. They had 3 daughters out of the 5 married off. And it was very nice. It was very satisfying, the ending, getting everything nicely wrapped up and everything being explained, because there was actually a section, the last chapter, summarized and actually told of the future and what happened to each of the characters. What I really loved about the last part was how the character was very defined, the main character, Elizabeth. And in terms of gender and gender equality and gender stereotypes in our daily lives, which was interesting, was that the main character, Elizabeth, was originally proposed to by Mr. Darcy. And when he did it, he was very rude, to say the least, in his proposal. But the second time he did it, after they'd both fallen in love with each other, his proposal was much kinder and was less stereotypical. And what's interesting is when you could tell by how he proposed that when you do not confront someone as being objectively boy or girl, it overall not only sounds nicer, but you sound more equal and sincere. Because his first time when Mr. Darcy proposed to Elizabeth, it was very much like, you're a woman of a lower class, and I really shouldn't marry you, but I love you still, and despite all your imperfections and difficulties, I will take you. But when he did it the second time, he didn't mention at all woman, class, or any real major stereotypes or anything. So it made his proposal sound much more sincere, and you could tell he was a changed man because he didn't mention flaws when he proposed, basically. And then what was very nice about the book and literature itself in understanding culture and gender is that culture changes and gender stereotypes changes, but at its root, the main things that we're still fighting today happened hundreds of years ago. Like, it's not something that can be solved easily, and it puts in perspective how difficult some change is, how difficult it is to change a culture, how difficult it is to change a stereotype. It's not something that can be easily overcome. And all the in the news, all the marches and protests that have been going on, it probably will continue to go on, and we need to keep fighting for it, because as long as there are preconceived notions that some people grow up believing, it's your job to change their mind. And often enough, you have to change it during the middle of their life. So they grow up believing this, just as Mr. Darcy in the book, he grew up believing he was better than most people because of money and wealth. Or another character, Mr. Wickham, he grew up believing he was better than most people and more deserving than most people because he grew up in a nicer house as a favorite of a father. But in some cases, Mr. Wickham, they never change. You'll never be able to change everyone's mind about a subject. Or in Mr. Darcy's case, you don't change their mind until halfway through their life. So you have half the population still believing at a certain point, and it takes making everyone believe the same thing from the beginning of their life to truly change something. And then another aspect about this is obviously the title of the book is Pride and Prejudice. And so there were a lot of prejudices held against other people because of things like their social status, their gender, their connections, who they're associated with, which was a big one. And I think in order to, again, change culture and make a change, you need to put prejudice aside. If you want the truth, if you want to be sincere, and if you want to be able to connect with most people, you need to put prejudices aside. Now, sometimes prejudices Sometimes they're correct. Sometimes they're correct preconceived notions. But in many cases, they're wrong. And you kind of have to find out things for yourself. And you have to meet the person for yourself. Just like how Mr. Darcy in her book, he stopped an engagement from happening because he had a prejudice against a family, and he thought, oh, she must not love him, she must not be good, I must tell him not to marry her. He was wrong. She did love her, and he needed to put these prejudices aside, and he ultimately was able to do so, and the couple was able to get married. But he needed to move on seeing what he thought he was seeing. He needed to open up his eyes and actually learn about something, about someone, before making a guess. It's a very good book. Really enjoyed it. And I think this had all to do with gender, female character during the early 1800s, and culture, their society, how that affected literally everything from marriage to food to clothing. And yeah, it's very nice. I highly recommend this book, by the way. Pride and Prejudice. Very nice.